How worried should I be about driving on a cold engine? There's millions of videos popping up all the time about cold engine damage, how short trips damage our engines. The reality is that things are different for different types of engine. Judging by comments on these videos, people have very different experiences. Some are fastidious in guaranteeing the lifespan of the engine by being ultra cautious. Others have a devil may care attitude and just run things to the absolute max and are quite aggressive with the engine when cold, and they'll say they've had no problems. But the reality is that different engines respond differently to this excessive wear and tear period. All engines have more wear and tear when they're cold, when they first start. We're going to break the video down into different engine types and just discuss how risky it is to run an engine hard on a cold start with different engine types. The first engine we're going to look at is the small capacity turbo. Most manufacturers are now pushing out these small turbo engines. We're seeing them dropping 2-litre engines and dropping 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 turbos in to produce the same amount of power and give better fuel economy. The age of the car has a big bearing on this, and modern cars are very well engineered. Manufacturers have thought about the wear and tear on a cold engine, and there's various things that they've done to mitigate it. So if we're dealing with an old engine, we need to be really careful. If we're dealing with a modern engine, there's a lot of protection already built in, and that's certainly true of a lot of these modern turbo engines. The turbo itself requires oil. It spins at very high speeds. It needs the lubrication to protect the bearings inside the turbo, and that's just not happening when the oil is first cold. Now, manufacturers have specified very thin oils that get up to temperature very quickly. So if we have a turbocharged engine, a small capacity turbo, and it's generally got quite a high revving nature, we would want to be fairly careful when we first start it so as not to stress the turbo, to allow the oil a bit of a time to get up to temperature. We're not talking about getting up to operating temperature. There's a lot more lubrication that goes on at, say, 30 or 40 degrees than when the engine is first started and when it's first cold. It's exponentially better as the temperature rises. You get the maximum lubrication and protection usually at about 90 degrees in most modern turbocharged engines. And it's also important to allow them to cool down at the end of a run. Now, most modern turbocharged engines have a supplementary oil pump and coolant that runs after the engine is shut off to keep the turbo cool, to keep it lubricated, and that just gives you an added measure of protection. So you might want to just check to see how clever your turbocharger design is and if that protection has been built in, and if it has, we don't need to be quite as paranoid driving on a cold engine. Next up, we're talking about large capacity engines, the V6s, the V8s, the 3-4 litre engines. There's a lot of metal in those. The oil pan itself is much larger. The tolerances are much higher because there's more metal in these engines and they're heavier. They tend to take a bit longer to get up to temperature, but the risk of wear and tear on these over-engineered big heavy-duty engines is much lower just because there's more metal involved, heavier components. It's generally operating at lower RPM ranges as well, and the overall temperature range is usually much lower in a V6 or a V8 engine compared to the high revving turbocharged engine. Naturally aspirated engines, typically about 2 litres, 1.8, we see in a lot of production cars nowadays. They're somewhere between the two. You can generally drive a little harder on these sooner than maybe you would in a turbocharged engine, but maybe not quite as soon as you would in a large capacity V6, V8 engine. Hybrids are interesting. They are generally designed to operate at a lower operating temperature. You will generally see your hybrid sitting at about 60 degrees and sometimes peaking up to about 90 degrees. We're talking oil temperature there, and they've been designed to operate in that. You will find they tend to use very thin oils. There's various mechanisms to keep the oil and the coolant up to temperature when the engine is disabled, and the electric motor that's driving the hybrid system is supplementing, so there is less stress and wear and tear on the conventional engine. In general then, hybrids are quite well suited to driving in cold conditions, and really there's not a great deal of need to granny them. The technology around the modern hybrid is usually so well designed that we don't have to make much adjustment at all as a driver, other than perhaps being light on the throttle until the combustion engine has had a chance to warm up a little bit and get a little bit of heat in the system. Most hybrids as well, once the engine has cut in, it will stay cut in until it has reached an optimum temperature, and then it will cycle with the electric motor. Please let me know your experiences with hybrids and how you've got on with it. But I would say if you just do mainly short trips and short journeys, but frequent short trips and short journeys, the hybrid is probably the best option to go for. There's less wear and tear on those than maybe some of the other engines that are out there. We've got to talk about the rotary engines. Mazda have used the Wankel engine in the RX-7s, the RX-8s, and some other cars also use these. Now, the seals, the rotor seals inside the engine are very precisely engineered. They're very sensitive to hard acceleration before they have warmed up. They need a chance to reach their optimum operating temperature. The metals inside need to fully expand. The oils need to reach their optimum viscosity to provide the lubrication that these engines need. And these engines spin at very high speeds. Typically 5 to 7, 10,000 RPM is what you'll hit in a daily drive. And there's a lot more motion going on in these engines. They're not reciprocating, so it's a different kind of stress going on, but they are still quite sensitive to the way we warm them up. And I would certainly advise anyone with a rotary engine to go careful until you've got a little bit of heat built up into the engine. Now, the last category could apply to a lot of the others as well. We're talking about high performance engines. High performance engines tend to have forged parts, forged components inside them. These harder metals are subject to greater rates of expansion, and often in a performance engine you'll notice a rattle when it's cold. You'll get piston slap, and if you drive it hard during that period, you're going to accelerate the wear and tear on that engine a lot more. If you have a family car that's not got these forged components, it's going to be a lot more forgiving. Forged parts are also harder, so they wear at a lower rate than maybe some of the softer metals. So some people might argue that because they're stronger, they are more resistant to this problem of cold startup. And again, that's a very, very complex discussion. It depends a lot on the engine design. But I would certainly advise you, if you've got a high performance engine, particularly if it's got forged components or maybe you've rebuilt it, be very careful and cautious when you first start it up and when you first start driving. And finally, we come to diesel engines. Now, diesel engines use compression to ignite the fuel. You need a lot of heat in that cylinder. As the air is compressed, it gets hotter, then the fuel is injected, and as the fuel hits this hot charge of air, it burns instantly, and the piston is obviously pushed away as the expansion goes on inside the cylinder. Now, that is not as effective when the engine is cold. Diesels are equipped with glow plugs to warm up the cylinders to get a little bit of heat inside the engine. You're dealing with very high compression ratios inside of diesel engines as well, and they are in the main very solidly engineered, very well built. They use very tough parts and components, and they outlast most petrol engines. So overall, the diesel engine, I would say, is stronger and more resilient to cold start. But your modern diesel engine has particulate filters, an exhaust gas recirculation system, and lots of other components. And as the engine starts to warm up, it produces less soot. The last thing we want is to be dumping a lot of soot into all these pollution control systems. And if we drive particularly hard on a cold engine, that's exactly what we're doing. We're producing more soot. It's not burning as cleanly and efficiently as possible. And that is eventually going to become a problem to us. It's going to need an expensive fix further down the line. So the degree of risk depends very much on the engine design. I would certainly encourage everyone to think about the cold start, allowing a little bit of heat inside the engine before we start driving it hard, maybe limiting the RPM to the lower third for the first couple of minutes of our journey at least. Some engines warm up very quickly and others take a lot longer to get up to operating temperature. And generally, if we're dealing with the newer car, there's a lot of protection already built in. It's going to stop us from using that upper part of the RPM range if the engine is too cold. Now, you might argue that manufacturers have set that rather cautiously, and we can make more sensible decisions by just backing off on our use of the throttle. But it's certainly not a big hardship, is it, to just let the engine warm up slightly for 30 seconds or so when we first start it. That gives us a chance to put a seatbelt on to get a little bit of heat inside the car, which is always comfortable in winter. Unless, of course, we're in extremely cold areas, we need to do something different then. But then going light on the throttle and using lower RPM, for most of us, that's not a great hardship for the first 2 or 3 minutes of our journey. And then gradually, as the engine warms up, we start using more of the RPM range, and that will just go a long way to prolong the lifespan of our engine. If you feel I've missed an engine group out in this discussion, please let me know in the comments. Please let me know your thoughts on the overall cold start, the routine that you go through when you first start your engine when it's cold. If you like this video, please hit the like button. That really does help us to get out there, as does subscribing to the channel. We've lined up this video and this playlist that you should find really interesting. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in these next videos.